Hey YouTubers, so today I bringing you a brand new janky video, and the project of the day is front struts for my Ford Focus. They've been making noise for a while and gotten progressively worse. I just haven't had time to mess with it really, but I ordered some struts, got a good deal on Rock Auto. Sometimes they jack you up on the shipping for small ticket items, but you know, if you can get larger items or combine multiple items from the same warehouse, you can get a fairly good deal on the shipping, so it's not so bad. But other than that, you know, ordered the parts. They came in last night. Didn't really feel like messing with it, so I just waited till this morning. So now I am on my way to my workshop to take the Ford Focus apart, take off the front struts, and I'll show you guys what the new ones look like, what the old ones look like, and then I'll put Humpty Dumpty back together, and hopefully it'll be riding like a Cadillac, or at least a Focus with new struts. You know. But yeah, that's the project. And what else? I think that's all I'm doing today. Yeah, so we'll see. Okay, so I got my Focus in here in the workshop, and I'm about to take it apart, but real quick before I do that, I'm gonna go over what I got and why I got it. There are multiple options. I went to Rock Auto and I got front struts. They have many options. You could get no name brand, which it's hit or miss with those, and then you could get the name brands, you know, things like KYB and Monroe, and then of course the Motorcraft, which is what I got. Or you could get a complete loaded strut, which comes with the strut tower and the spring and the strut all complete. So you take off the old one, put on a new one, and you know, they have KYB loaded struts for this car at $110 a piece, which is not a bad price. It really isn't. And KYB is a well-known name. I put KYB on my Jeep. You know, they're great shocks. These that I opted for are Motorcraft. They are OEM equipment. Here, I'll show you right here. If you look on the side, it says FOMO Co. Ford Motor Company. These are the exact replacements that you would get if you bought them from the dealership. And so this one has a L for left side, and this one has R for right side. I went with these for a couple of reasons. One is I like buying OEM parts when I can, because I know exactly what I'm getting, and usually the quality is very high. The other reason is that I don't have to worry about fitment issues. You know, Rock Auto always advertised that their parts are OEM fit, and for the most part they are like 99% OEM fit. Sometimes you gotta grind a little piece down here, shave a little piece there, you know, to make them fit. With Motorcraft struts, I'm just gonna slap them on there and I know they're gonna fit exactly right. But yeah, for shits and giggles, I called Ford Motorcraft. I called the dealership where I actually bought my car this morning to find out how much those struts were, and they are $140.60 each at the dealership, and I paid $60 something each, plus shipping came up to $136 for both struts and shipping. So $136 got me those two struts here, and that's still less than I would have paid for just one strut from the dealership. The exact same thing. So let me take my car apart. Okay, so I got both struts off. To get this off of here, on a lot of cars, this spindle would have two bolts actually on this side, and then the strut would just have a piece that bolts to the side of the spindle instead of going through it. On this one, the strut actually goes straight through top to bottom, and then this bolt pinches on the side here. Now what I did to get mine off was I removed the lower ball joint, right here. I also disconnected the outer tie rod from the spindle and disconnected the sway bar link, so that pretty much everything was disconnected and moved out of my way for convenience sake. I made sure and disconnected my wheel speed sensor right down here. Okay, don't let that pull. This wire, even though it's so close to the wheel and outside, it's kind of sensitive, and you mess that thing up and you'll have all kinds of ABS codes and traction control codes and all kinds of problems. So you got to be wary of that. So I did that, and then what I did was took my tuning fork. This is a old school ball joint separator, and I jammed it, I wedged it in here in this space, and then hammered it up as far as it would go, and so it opened this orifice just enough that I could hammer this whole thing down and out of the way. I just hit it right here with a hammer until it came out of the way, and then I unbolted the strut from the top up there. Well, up here, the whole cowl has to come out to get to it, and I unbolted it and took it out. Now, this is the passenger side strut. I just compressed the spring. Since I didn't buy the loaded struts, I gotta compress the spring, take the strut tower off, take the spring off, and then put the whole assembly on my new strut and then put it back together. And then, so this top piece, I think just about every one of these on a McPherson strut I've seen has 3 bolts on top. Some of them are directional, some of them are universal. This is directional, to where you see those little ridges on there. Those face inboard on the vehicle, so they face towards the center of the vehicle, and so this on this side would be on the front, and then on the opposite side, the other strut, when you look at it from the top, it would be facing like this, and so this side would be inboard of the vehicle with these little knobs on it, facing towards the center of the windshield, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And then once I have this tightened up here, I put this spring clamp on here, and you don't have to tighten this all the way down until it's all the way tight. Okay, you just have to tighten it to where, see, like right now I can see that I have some end play, so there's no more tension of the spring on this strut mount. So when I unbolt this, it's not going to go flying on me or anything like that. So that's, once you can get that tension off the strut mount on the spring, there's some end play, you know, maybe a 1/2 inch or whatever, then you're ready to take this off. And taking these off and back on, you always have to get a socket that goes down in here to loosen that, and then you put a wrench on here to hold this in place, and then you twist this off. That is the only correct way to remove this and to reinstall it. If you ever yourself find yourself, or you see your mechanic trying to grab the actual shaft of the strut down here, grabbing this part so it won't spin, and then unloosening that bolt, find you a new mechanic, because he ruined your strut. Okay, if you put anything on there, whether it's a pair of vice grip or a pair of pliers or anything like that, this shaft needs to be perfectly smooth and clean, because it seals up against the rubber seal down in there, and if you damage that seal, then all the fluid will leak out, you lose your shock dampening ability, and the strut is basically garbage. So don't ever do that. Always coming from the top. You know, put a Torx on there, or whatever fitting is on top, and either, you know, and then hold the nut in place, and then loosen that up from the top, and that's how you take that off. So I'm going to do that now, and we'll get to see what my shocks look like. Okay, so I'm going to show you real quick what's going on with my shocks. Good shock, bad shock. So good shock, I put it upside down and I compress it. Here, so you can see better. So if I put it up, I compress it. See, I have to push it all the way down, then it comes all the way up. So I compress. it goes all the way back up. With the bad shock, put it there, and the whole thing just collapses. I mean, like, it comes back out on its own, but I mean, like, see, 2 fingers. You shouldn't be able to drop that shock down like that with 2 finger force. It should take a little more than that. Okay, so real quick, I got 1 strut. See how nice and shiny it is on there, and it's already bolted up. Everything on this side is already reassembled the way it was. You know, it's ready to go. And then I got this strut is ready to install. So here's my new one, and of course there are the 2 old ones. But let me see something here. Okay, yeah, I thought I had it on magnify. But anyway, yeah, they're the old 2 struts that I took off. They're bad. When you do this and you didn't buy the loaded strut and you have to change everything over, always make sure that you get all of your rubber mounts. This protective boot, you definitely want that. It keeps dirt from getting on the shaft of the strut. And then this lower rubber piece will keep it from making a whole bunch of clattering noise. You know, just pretty much transferring everything except for the strut back onto the new unit and then putting it back together. So I'm gonna finish this up and then go for a little ride. Now when I'm putting back in the strut, what I did was I bolted it back up on the top. These bolts aren't tight, as you can see by that gap. They're just hand tightened. All of them are threaded in, and I tightened them as far as I could go with by hand, so it's in place. And then the spindle, right where it mounts in place, I haven't reconnected the outer tie rod or the stabilizer link or any of that. None of that has been reconnected yet. So this is pretty much just hanging on my axle, which you shouldn't let it just hang down, so I have the jack under it. But anyway, so what I did was I hand tightened it on the top, and then what I'm going to do is slide this into the slot on the spindle, and then I'm gonna jack this whole thing up into the strut, and it'll just pop in place. Which let me get. So on the back side of the strut, and I'll take this over here so you can see. So this strut is on there like this, and on the back side of the spindle where the bolt goes through, there's a space, there's a slot. And so what happens is this tab here goes into the slot, and then the whole spindle just bottoms out against this piece right here that's welded on the side of the strut. So it just you just jack it up until it bottoms out right here. Here, I'll show you. So this tab, let me see, yeah, so this tab goes in the slot right here, and then it just bottoms out on this piece right here. And so that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to jack this up, and then it's just a matter of kind of lining it up. It'll fall into place pretty much once you start jacking the whole assembly up. Now I need 2 hands to do this, so let's see. I think I'm gonna have to jam that tuning fork in the back there and open it up just enough to get that in there, and I can't do that, so I hold in the phone, so I'm gonna do that. Hey guys, so today I just wanted to do a little summary on my shock absorber switch out. Everything went okay. I ended up, while I was wrestling with one of the shock absorbers to get it mounted into the spindle, I ended up damaging the boot for my lower ball joint on the passenger side. I hope that's not going to be a major issue and I can just change the ball joint and not the complete lower arm. Sometimes it's removable, sometimes it's not. I guess I'll find out in time. Anyway, other than that, everything went smooth. The car rides really good. It rides as it did before. It's a lot quieter now. You know, those shocks, what was happening with the old ones is that they were completely dead when I first started driving in the morning, and then as they warmed up, they were marginally okay, you know. And so for the first maybe 20 minutes of driving, especially on rough road, it was horrible driving that car. I mean, it clattered and clunked all over the place, and now that noise has gone away. And you know, it does a lot for the ride quality to have new shocks on the car. They're not that old, but they had over 200,000 miles on them. They were the shocks that came with the car from the factory. And then I bought OEM shocks and I put it on there. So the car rides now the way it did when I bought it, which is good. I mean, for me personally, I feel like that car, the springs are a little too stiff for the weight of the car. It rides, it's not sporty. It's just stiff. I don't know how to describe it better because like I've had sporty shocks on cars. Like I had a Saab and I actually had like 3 Saabs, but my Saab had a sporty ride to it. It wasn't super stiff, but it was definitely confidence inspiring as far as the handling goes. This car, not so much that, you know, it's kind of stiff. I will say though, for a front wheel drive car, when you corner at the limits, it doesn't have nearly as much oversteer as other front wheel drive cars I've had. You know, I had a front wheel drive Audi and that thing understeered horribly. You know, this car, it's neutral right up until the limit, and then the front wheels start to break away. You know, it's predictable. It no drama really. The suspension is nice. It's got fully independent rear suspension, which is good on a front wheel drive car, especially if you drive a little bit hard like I do. So, you know, it's just letting you guys know everything went well. If you can spring for the OEM shocks, do that. You won't get any surprises as far as fitment issues go or ride quality. I mean, I've seen people buy, I've seen firsthand a guy bought aftermarket shocks, some no-name brand for a Mazda 3, and he put it on and the back of the car was about 3 inches higher up than it was before, you know, and so he had to send the shocks back and wait for the other ones to come. And so problems like that, if you go with the OEM, you generally don't run into it. I'm not saying that no-name brands are always bad. I'm just saying that if you don't want to have to wonder about it, go ahead and spring for the OEM, and then you know exactly what you're getting. So yeah, my car is riding like it did when I first got it. I'm happy about that. I just hope that lower ball joint is a part that I can change out by itself instead of pulling that whole lower control arm, which the lower control arm isn't that hard to pull, but it's aluminum and I think it's going to be expensive.